Josh Burns, welcome back to Afternoon Briefing. I want to get on to the issue that you're actually still in Parliament while all your colleagues have decamped for their hometowns, and that is an inquiry into human rights in Australia. But it would be remiss of me not to start with the issue that is dominating discussion right around the world, and that is the conflict between Israel and Gaza. Some of your Labor colleagues...
And Hamas.
And Hamas, of course. Some of your Labor colleagues, Ed Husic and Anne Ali in particular, came out yesterday and effectively said that there hasn't been enough of an emphasis or enough attention given to the plight of Palestinians in this situation. How do you view those sort of comments?
The first thing to say is that I am deeply saddened by this conflict between Israel and Hamas. There are no winners here, Matt. And I don't want to see anyone be killed or caught up in this conflict, whether they be an Israeli kid going to a music festival or a child in Gaza. And no loss of life is to be celebrated. And on the contrary, every loss of life is to be mourned. And so I think, it is being felt deeply by a lot of people. And, one thing that I think that's really important to maintain in this is our shared humanity, is to remember that we are all people, that we are, we want to see peace. I dream, Matt, of peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and I desperately want to see a peaceful resolution so two people can live side by side, and we hope to see the more peaceful days ahead.
You are, of course, a member of Australia's Jewish community. There are many Jewish Australians in your electorate, and we have seen an outpouring of grief from that community since the conflict ramped up now almost two weeks ago. What's your read on how Australia's Jewish community are actually feeling at the moment as this conflict progresses?
My community is shattered, and they're also, they're witnessing, there's a lot of online abuse, a lot of hate being directed at the Jewish community, as there is a lot of hate being directed at the Islamic community. I also think that we all have a role to play to ensure that we are getting through this calmly as possible and with as many facts as possible. And take an example like yesterday, for example, where, or 2 days ago, where the world's media basically swallowed a line from Hamas that it was Israel who blew up a hospital. And as the sort of facts unfolded, more and more people and sources pointed out the fact that, well, first of all, you shouldn't take Hamas on their word, the people who have started this whole conflict. But more than that is that the consequences have been desperately diabolical, and we've seen a breakdown of peace talks with the United States. We've seen Arab nations, protests across all Arab nations, and we've seen abuse being directed all the way to communities here in Australia, to the Jewish community. And this is the potential of what this conflict brings, is so much division just by the sheer publication of an allegation by a terrorist organisation. So, how's my community feeling, Matt? It's trying to make sense of a world where, people are pointing fingers, people are talking at each other, people are directing, anger and misinformation at one another. And they are trying to hold their own and stand together in and amongst all of that noise, but it is really difficult, and I hope that we're all able to get through this together.
Do you think it is fueling a division here in Australia where, you pointed to the abuse that Jewish Australians are copping, Palestinian and Islamic Australians also copping a fair share of abuse at the moment? Is it fueling a sense of disquiet among the broader community because it has become almost like a two-team sort of argument here?
Well, this is something we need to avoid in Australia. I mean, we're Australians, and we have to respect our fellow citizen, and we have to embrace our fellow citizen. And all of the things that we've come together previously, we can't lose them now when these fault lines appear internationally. And I think it's really important that us as political leaders don't seek to exacerbate these divides in society. I've seen misinformation put out from the left of politics, and the Greens have put out factually incorrect information to try and exacerbate divide. And then I've also seen it from the coalition where there's been moments where people have really tried to sort of create divide in between the Labor Party on this. It's not helpful. And what I think the best thing for Australia and for our local communities, whether they be the local Jewish community or the local Islamic community, is that we maintain facts. We remember that this whole thing started by a terrorist organisation who do not represent the Palestinian people. This is a terrorist organisation that sought to attack the Israeli civilians, and as soon as they can be dealt with, I hope we're able to come towards more peaceful days ahead and rebuild some of the societal fractures that we're seeing across the world.
One last question on this before we move on. Ed Husic and Anne Ali both suggested that the Palestinians are being subjected to collective punishment by Israel. Collective punishment, obviously a very specific word in international law when it comes to the Geneva Convention. It is something that is considered a war crime. Is Israel's response to the situation in Gaza and effectively laying siege to that territory proportionate and right?
The first thing to say is that there are almost 200 hostages that are still being held in Gaza. The biggest thing that can be done for de-escalation is to release those hostages. That phrase is not one I would use. It's not my view. But again, I would come back to this point, is that, we don't need to have the Jewish versus Muslim view being sort of pitted against one another. It's not helpful. And I think, Ed and Anne are my friends, and they are great people, and I care deeply about both of them. And there's going to be a moment where we all need to come together after this and help rebuild and rejoin communities, and I will be standing next to both of them proudly. And I'll stand with our Islamic brothers and sisters as well. But right now, what I want to see in the region is hostages being released, a de-escalation as quickly as possible so that Israelis can live without fear of the sort of terror attack that we saw on 7 October ever happening again, because we would not tolerate that in Australia. If there were 260 of our kids gunned down at a music festival, what would we do, really? And it's I want to see an end to this conflict as quickly as possible, but I also want to ensure that there is safety for the Israelis and, of course, safety for the Palestinian people as well.
So if it isn't collective punishment, what is it?
It's a response to a terrorist organisation who killed 1,300 people. And a terrorist organisation which is prescribed in Australia as a terrorist organisation, one that has terrorised not just Israelis but Palestinian people as well. This is a terrorist organisation that is deliberately putting out misinformation, deliberately making accusations, deliberately targeting civilians to this day. There are still rockets being fired into civilian areas. This is a terrorist organisation funded by Hamas, funded by Iran. This is not a good faith actor, nor one that you can make peace with. And if Australia had a terrorist attack where 1,300 of our people were attacked, then a similar response, I think, would be being considered by Australia right now.